Chapter 7. The Engagement Ball. Delmont, Julienne's parents, her grandfather, the Brents, and all the servants that were scattered about the room below now stood breathlessly watching their queen descend the staircase. Julienne's newly acquired jewels, including the perilous stone, twinkled brilliantly with every step. Her mask poised upon a bejeweled sceptre covered her face. Her flowing gown trailed a few steps behind. The scent of 1,000 candles filled the air about them, flames reflecting in the countless mirrors and crystal handle holders. Bowls, glasses, and chandeliers made it a world of sparkle and glitter. She would have it no other way. Her perfect engagement ball. As she reached the last step, she lowered her mask. Her father took her hand and bowed. "Your Majesty." She kissed him on the cheek when he rose. A figure moved forward. His broad shoulders were quite attractive, but the mint green satin and elaborate powdered wig seemed a bit excessive. He took her hand, and she suddenly had to convert a bubble of laughter into a cough when she realised it was Delmont. She curtsied low to the floor to hide the giggles, which refused to be tamed. Delmont a dandy? Magnificent, he murmured when she finally rose, satisfied that his costume had enough extra frivolity to suit her tastes. This was her night after all, and he had instructed his tailor to add as much frippery as allowed by social standards. "Thank you," she murmured back, and smiled at her mother over Delmont's shoulder. Slowly, the room began to whisper and mingle. A hushed hum fell over them as they awaited the arrival of more guests. Any moment now the doorbell would ring, sending the night into an elegant frenzy. Julienne stood quietly, listening. A sudden break in laughter from someone across the room gave permission for all to raise their voices from their self-imposed whispers. "Aha!" Julienne grinned up at Delmont. She loved that part. As she suspected, it was Lady Newbury who expelled the gaiety. All it took was one sound, a bit louder than the rest, for everyone to follow suit. Julienne wondered what power possessed 50 people to stand about and whisper, a conscious effort in subduing their natural speech, until someone, quite by accident, broke through the accepted guidelines of whispers. Julienne smiled at the unsuspecting Lady Newbury, mindful of the fact that this woman had subconsciously taken it upon herself to break the silence at the last 3 social events Julienne had attended. Julienne made a mental note of the number 4. The Creightons began the flow of guests, bringing with them the smell of expensive perfume, the elegance of vibrant satins and silks, and with their masks brought the allure of mystery. Music filled the air, dancing with the candlelight, courting all that sparkled and wooing all that hid. The sly seduction of song. Once the ballroom was fully occupied, a minuet began, one of the many to come. Julienne and Delmont put the night in motion with their first dance. She had asked her parents specifically not to have dance cards, for they took away the mystery of whose arms she would find herself in next. She beamed when her father came forth to claim her next dance. He spun her gracefully onto the floor, and the room came alive in a small whirlwind of wonder. His rust-coloured velvet costume was soft under her hand. She smiled at him warmly, thinking he always looked his best in these rustic shades. "Juju, you are the most beautiful girl on this earth," he sighed. "But I clearly see you are not a woman, and no longer my little girl." "Oh, Papa," she said, holding him a little tighter. "I will always be your little girl." He spun her round in a swirl of purple skirts. "Papa, tell me of the Queen of Perils' parish." "In good time, my dear. Your mother and I will tell you all, but tonight is about you and Delmont." "But how did Grandpapa come to have the real perilous stones?" "Wouldn't you prefer to hear it before the fire?" "I suppose. Oh, Papa, your stories of the great Captain Austen, they are all wrong. What everyone said at the Buxtons, he simply isn't a hero at all." "Darling, you know better than to listen to rumours. Perhaps we should have offered more advice on this matter." "No, Papa, these are not rumours." "And how do you know?" "Well, I heard another story about him. He slit a man's throat and pulled out his spine." "Nonsense. What would you say if I told you there were terrible rumours about your mother and me before you were born? Would you believe them? You, Papa? No, of course not. The music slowed to its conclusion, and he guided her off the dance floor. Curiosity got the best of her. Were there truly terrible rumours about you and Mamma? In front of the fire, he promised, handing her off to a young man waiting eagerly for her next dance. 4 songs and 2 glasses of champagne later, Delmont found Julienne searching out her father. "Julienne, I have been having a hard time keeping up with you. Would you care to dance?" Truth be told, she was a bit tired of dancing. "I would rather more champagne, if it's not too much trouble," she said sweetly. "Of course. I shall return in a moment." "Thank you, Delmont." He bowed before walking into the crowd, and she again scanned the swirling colours of the dance floor for her father. She needed to know more of these rumours. "Julienne!" came the familiar voice of Bonnie Bolling, her best friend from finishing school. "Bonnie!" she exclaimed with a bounce, then got her enthusiasm under control, for proper young ladies did not bounce. "I hope you're enjoying the evening." "What a wonderful ball! I just danced with Bradford. He is so handsome." Bonnie was talking excitedly, but quietly through the side of her mouth. "Bradford Bond?" Julienne asked, and silently approved of the match. Her friend nodded, and her cheeks took on a reddish tint. "Well, I suppose Bonnie Bond isn't any worse than Bonnie Bolling." "No name teases, please." "He's coming this way." "Bradford, behind me." "Pull that curl over your shoulder," Julienne instructed quickly. "This one? Put it more onto your breast." "Like this?" Julienne winked her approval. "Good evening, Lady Vendant. A most magnificent ball." "Thank you, Lord Bond. Are you enjoying yourself?" "Very much so," he said, smiling at Bonnie. "And may I offer my congratulations?" "Thank you again." "Perhaps I could persuade you to join me for a dance?" he asked his host. Julienne saw Bonnie's pout from the corner of her eye. "Actually, I am awaiting Lord Brent's return. Perhaps Lady Bolling would enjoy a dance." A wide smile spread over his face as he turned to Bonnie, his eyes instinctively following the curl to her breasts. He swallowed before speaking. "I have already taken one of her dances, but if she'll permit me a bit more of her time, I would be indebted to her kindness." Bonnie glanced at Julienne with a thankful smile and took his arm. Julienne watched them disappear onto the floor. Yes, they would make a fine couple. She turned in the direction in which Delmont had disappeared and almost knocked into 2 of his arch-rivals, both in business and in romance. "Good evening, Lady Vendant. A most magnificent ball." "Congratulations to the betrothed," the first one announced. "Thank you," Julienne accepted. "May I say, you look ravishing tonight?" Ravishing. No one had said that yet, she thought. "And we brought you some champagne, since we saw you were without." "How kind." She took the offered glass. She was really enjoying getting to know Champagne. The bubbles fascinated her to no end. "Not nearly kind enough," the other said smoothly. "Words could never be kind enough to adequately describe your beauty." She smiled happily, though she wasn't completely sure what the conversation was about. Taking another sip of the champagne, she wondered what her admirers would say next. "I don't think a soul in London is missing these festivities," one remarked, gesturing to the crowded room. "Or your splendour," added the other, letting his eyes glide over her. "Ah, Lady Vendant," came another voice. "You are a dream tonight." A third man stepped between her previous admirers and took her hand for a gentle kiss. She rubbed at her hand after, the effects of the alcohol slowly dulling her sense of decorum. Soon there was a crowd before her, all clamouring for her attention and for their compliments to be heard. She saw Delmont on the outskirts of her following, politely trying to forge his way through. But when he failed to appear by her side, she surmised he had given up the struggle. Delmont forgotten, her thoughts were again captured by the bubbles rising in the glass. Where on earth did they come from? "Julienne," she heard softly behind her. "Sylvina!" Just the person she was hoping to see. Julienne excused herself from the gathering and steered Sylvina toward the large doors that led out to the veranda. "Jul, I can't believe it." Sylvina slurred a bit. "Believe what?" "This ball." She leaned closer. "I think I have champagne in my head." "In your head?" Julienne exclaimed, not at all sure how that could have happened. "I was dancing with Lord K, and I stepped on his foot. I apologised and told him that I wasn't used to champagne, and he said, 'Yes, sometimes it goes straight to your head.'" "Oh, I see." She didn't. Julienne took a deep breath of the cool night air. It was glorious. "This night is fantastic," Sylvina continued. "I've been complimented, proposed to, and propositioned all in one night." "Lord K," Julienne mused. She let her head fall back and was presented with the spectacle of 1,000 stars. "Ooh, look what I found." Sylvina stared upwards also and sighed. K's the one who propositioned me. K's the one who propositioned me." Julienne's mouth took on the shape of an O. "And you said?" "I thanked him but declined. I'd take a stable hand or steel worker over the gentry every time." No insult meant to Delmont. "No insult taken." A contented sigh escaped as she looked back to the stars above. She would soon be Lady Julienne Brent. She was certainly a lucky woman. "Funny things wine can say to you," Sylvina said, then asked, "Does that make sense?" Julienne leaned back against the railing for support when the stars began to wobble above her and replied, "I'm not sure, but I understand what you meant." Julienne's attention was once again drawn to the tiny bubbles rising and popping in her glass. She brought it close to her face and marvelled at the phenomenon. "How many bubbles are in here, do you think?" Sylvina pushed her glass downward. "No," she scolded. "You are not going to get obsessed with bubbles on the night of your bowl. I meant bull." Julienne raised her glass in a toast and took another sip, before sitting with determination on the marble bench. She wiggled her toes about and went to put the glass down beside her. 8 furry legs, each rising in turn around a fat body, slowly approached. She sprang away from the monster with a jolt, sending her champagne glass over the rail. Sylvina laughing at her friend's reaction, but not loud enough to cover the scream from below. Rushing to look over the railing, they found Bonnie and Bradford looking up. "Bonnie, are you hurt?" "No, just a few spots," she said, showing a display of wet stains down the front of her gown. "I am so sorry." Julienne tried hard to sound convincing through her laughter. "It was just cold." She winked and took Bradford's arm. "I'll just have to find something to do while it dries." The couple walked off into the garden, followed by her chaperoning aunt. Sylvina wondered aloud. "Why tiny spiders scare you so much, yet you practically play with water snakes? I'll never understand." Julienne shuddered and checked the bench and floor for spider relatives. "You know," Sylvina said very carefully and slowly, "I've met almost everyone here at one time or another, and yet I can't seem to place any of them." Julienne leaned closer and whispered conspiratorially, "That is because they are wearing costumes." They were both quiet for a moment, then burst into laughter. Delmont returned, handing them their champagne, and escorted them back into the glittering fantasy, cautioning them about the effects of too much wine. He strongly urged them to switch to the punch. Monique called the girls over to a little gathering consisting of Lady Brent, Lady Melanie Billingsley, and an assortment of unknown faces, while Delmont excused himself to talk with a business associate. Julienne was actively avoiding eye contact with Lady Brent. "Yes, Lady Billingsley is quite talented with her sketching," Lady Brent boasted of the girl she not so secretly wished was becoming her daughter-in-law. Lady Vendant then turned to Julienne. "Julienne, I have not seen any of your work, though I have heard you do have an artistic touch." Just then, from the corner of her eye, Julienne saw Delmont climbing the staircase in the entry hall, heading for the second floor. "But," she said aloud, turning to look behind her in the direction he had taken only moments ago. "Yes, yes," Monique answered for her distracted daughter. "She is very talented, though I don't believe she's spent much time with it lately. Have you, darling?" "But," Julienne answered, gesturing to the stairs, "she's had so much on her mind with the ball." "Yes, I have," Julienne agreed, determined to concentrate on the conversation at hand. Lady Brent hummed in disapproval. "Sylvina, this must be an occasion for you." "Yes, it is my first grand ball, and it is absolutely wonderful. I am indebted to the Vengeance for giving me the most spectacular night of my life. All the dancing and the food and the champagne." Again Lady Brent hummed. "Yes, the champagne." Julienne could imagine her fat little foot tapping the floor beneath her skirts. "Do you ride, Julienne?" Melanie asked. Julienne growled inwardly. "Yes, I do. I enjoy it very much." She knew Melanie had no interest in her except for her engagement to Delmont. "Then we must ride together soon." "Oh no, I don't think so." Julienne hid her grimace at the thought. "Excuse me," Lady Brent huffed. Julienne sighed, her senses muddled from all the champagne. "What I meant to say was that Thunder has been ill, and I have taken quite a preference to riding him alone. Perhaps when he is in better condition." There he was again. Delmont was coming down the stairs to the front entry hall. She looked over her shoulder again to where he should have been if her eyes were not playing tricks on her. "Excuse us," she announced suddenly. "Sylvina, I need your help with fixing my costume." She put her hands on her hips and twisted, trying to make a point of some kind or another. Her mother found her amusing, but also knew that some advice was in order. "What's wrong?" Sylvina asked, tripping over Julienne's foot as they made their way into the empty entry hall and attempted to lift Julienne's gown. "Delmont," Julienne whispered. Confused, Sylvina looked over Julienne's skirts and shook her head. "I don't think he'd fit under—" "No, he just went outside." She pointed at the door. "No, Delmont's on the other side of the room." Sylvina pointed in the opposite direction. "That's what I thought. He's up to something. Let's follow him." Julienne quietly opened the front door. "Jule, it wasn't him." Sylvina's eyes followed her friend's extended finger to find Delmont walking hurriedly towards the garden. "Quick! He's getting away!" Julienne called and rushed through the huge wooden door. "I wonder where he's off to," Sylvina whispered loudly as they tiptoed over the vast lawn to the edge of the garden. Julienne pulled it into a hiding behind a hedge. "I dunno. Why would he be sneaking out to the garden all by himself? That's not like Delmont at all. Maybe it's a surprise for you. Shh! We can't let him hear us." "A surprise for me?" Julienne stopped and watched as her friend seemed to begin to circle her, but at the same time stayed where she was. Julienne stepped backward to get a better view. Sylvina did it again, moving around then coming back, all without moving. "How do you do that?" Julienne asked, amazed. "Do what?" She took another step backward, fascinated by this anomaly. Her foot caught in her skirts, and she was thrown off balance and cast into the unknowns of a hedge. "Jule!" Sylvina exclaimed worriedly, going to her rescue, in the process of which she ground her heel into Julienne's foot, promptly producing the sought-after effect of getting Julienne back on her feet. "Are you all right?" "I'm so sorry." She began to laugh, and Julienne joined in the merriment. "I'm fine. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean—" "Don't worry. It's not your fault." Julienne squealed in laughter as she held her friend's shoulders. "It would have happened anyway. My feet automatically collapse at midnight." Sylvina burst into more drunken delight. "Why are we laughing?" came her grandfather's enthusiastic question as he popped out from behind the hedge. Julienne calmed at the unexpected entrance. "Grandpapa, We were talking. All right, he said. Just a moment. He went back to the hedge he had come from, leaned down and whispered, I'll be back momentarily. The girls exchanged glances. Let me just take off these shoes, her grandfather said. Now, what would you like to talk about? Julienne bit her lip and looked down at the shoes in his hand. Actually, Grandpapa, I wanted to talk to Sylvina. He looked at her and smiled. Well, then, he handed her his shoes. You'll be needing these more than I will. Thank you, she replied with a curtsy. Gascoigne, whispered a voice from the hedge. I'll be with you in a second, my dear, her grandfather answered. Oh, Julienne laughed again. It had never occurred to her that he hadn't been speaking to the hedge. Don't let us keep you, she offered. Right then. I should go. Have I helped you at all? Immensely. Ha! He exclaimed proudly. Always like to be of service. Rapiers after breakfast? I'll be there, Grandpapa. Good. He disappeared back behind the hedge. Jewel covered her mouth in silent laughter, a very unladylike expression, then remembered. Delmont! Where did he go? They looked around but saw nothing but hedges. This way, Julienne said, grabbing Sylvina's hand and rushing to the edge of the garden. But he was nowhere in sight. She sighed. We've lost him. Maybe he went back inside. No! There! Across the expanse of the lawns, they saw a pale green form disappearing into the cover of the trees. Quick! She again grasped her friend's hand, and with the other held up her skirts, and the two scampered through the flower-scented night after their green satin-clad prey. Sterling held Toller tightly in his hand, smiling not only at his triumph, but at the old pathway that was still there despite old branches and new growth. This was the same pathway he travelled as a child down to the wharf. He had not been expecting to find it so easily. But here it was, at the end of the lawns, right where he left it 20 years past. It all seemed so small now. The trees not the jungle he remembered, the brook a mere 6 feet wide, not the river he remembered playing in as a child. Even the wharf was not the huge expanse of territory he had remembered it as. Now standing at one end, he could see clear to the woods on the other, which hid the pathway to the secret cove. He chose to stay within the safety of the trees and not use the roadway. There was no reason to take chances when the safe departure of the Black Fortune was so close at hand. If he hurried, he could reach the ship in less than an hour, and they could set sail if the currents were with them. He prayed the siren of the sea would be with them, for if they missed the tide, and he had to stay in port until the next day, Austin would surely let his displeasure be known about the additional delay. Upon arrival in the secret cove, he sighed in relief. There was no one on deck. He had wondered if the crew was ready and awaiting his return. He grinned, thinking that explaining his venture to Austin would make it all worthwhile. Julienne and Sylvina crouched behind a rock, their eyes as wide open as their mouths. The huge black ship rocked gently before them, the muffled sounds of the crew floating in the air. Not a soul could be seen, but their presence was felt. Sylvina finally spoke. It's a boat. Julienne turned to her, but said nothing. Jewel, why would Delmont come all this way to a boat? My piano! Julienne exclaimed, then began to talk excitedly. Remember, Delmont said I could have a piano when we were married. He must have had one shipped here, and he was going to give it to me tonight as an engagement present. She clapped with excitement. Then we'd better get back so as not to spoil his surprise, Sylvina said, standing and wrapping her arms about her waist. The huge black shadow cast by the ship was terrifying. No, let's help him. Jewel, I don't think... But before Sylvina could finish, Julienne was crawling over the rocks toward the ship. Austin stood behind the desk in his cabin, Princess, his fluffy white cat, lay curled in one corner on a pile of maps, purring as she watched her captain. Austen's mind was a bit troubled. It seemed quite a coincidence that Jewel, the girl who, for no reason he could fathom, had been occupying his thoughts, was the same girl who would marry Delmont Brent, Sterling's cousin. He couldn't mention the impending marriage to Sterling. If Sterling knew about his cousin's nuptials, he could bring up the subject himself. Then he would reveal that the violet-eyed girl he'd spoken of recently was none other than the bride-to-be. The door opened and Sterling popped in. "Cap? Princess?" He had changed in his cabin and stashed Toller away for just the right moment to produce for Austen. Princess stood and stretched. "Are we ready to sail?" "The men are below, waiting for the word." "Where is your chair?" Sterling asked, circling to see the vacancy behind the desk. "Chair?" "The green one, that was behind the desk, with all the jewels." "Long story. I'll bring up one of the burgundy chairs from below deck tomorrow. Right now, we need to sail. We're 2 days behind already." "Aye?"
"Jules, it's dark in here."
Julienne could feel Savina's death grip on her skirt.
"But I know it's down here."
They had followed the light of a lantern down a ladder. Another glow shone from a hatchway.
"Look, down there. The piano must be in there."
They peered down the hatch. There were crates upon crates. Julienne turned and started down the ladder. Sylvina followed, but only because of her fear of dying alone proved stronger than her fear of dying with her friend.
"Sylvina, look."
Julienne stood over an opened crate.
"Silver."
She looked through silver goblets, silver plates, silver serving bowls, silver pots.
"Do you think he got you silver for your engagement gift?"
Julienne grabbed the lantern from the wall to shed light upon the rest of the room.
"Oh, look at that table,"
Sylvina said, moving to the back of the room.
"And those chairs.
How grand." "Those will look great in the study," Julienne mused, and had to catch her footing when the ship rocked. "Or the hallway of paintings," Sylvina suggested. Julienne tested one of the overstuffed burgundy velvet seats. "Very comfortable. How did Delmont know this was what I wanted?" "They look a lot more comfortable than a piano," Sylvina offered before plopping into the other one. Julienne laughed and opened up the crate beside the chair. "Cloth? Why would he give me cloth for our wedding?" Sylvina shook her head and kicked off the top of a crate before her. "What's in it?" Julienne asked. "I dunno. Too tired to look." Julienne stood and got her balance before taking a look. "Ooh, look," she said, pulling out soft feather beddings. "You are tired, dear friend. This will comfort you." She laid the heavy bedding over her friend. Laughing, Sylvina snuggled into the warmth. Another swell rocked the boat, and holding her stomach, Julienne made her way back to her chair. "I hope Delmont comes soon. I believe I want him to carry me home." They were silent for a long time, listening to the drone of far-off voices. The creaking of the wood, no longer eerie, took on the duty of a self-appointed hypnotist. In the now quiet room, nothing else existed, only the slow motion of the waves and the comfort of the chairs.
"Jewel?"
Sylvina asked in a quiet voice.
Maybe we should go back to the ball."
"All right," Julienne answered lazily. "We'll just wait a minute longer for Delmont." "All right," came Sylvina's answer, but was soon followed by the steady breaths of her sleeping form. "See," Julienne whispered lazily. "I hear footsteps. Delmont must be coming now."